Leave a comment with your city and subscribe to the YouTube channel.
The crystalline halls of the galactic nexus had never witnessed such chaos. High Arbitrator Velinara, her forearms gesticulating wildly as her translator struggled to keep up with her panicked speech, stared at the holographic displays floating above the emergency council chamber. Red warning lights bathed the assembled representatives in an ominous glow as data streams cascaded across every available surface. "This is impossible," she declared, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of barely controlled hysteria. "The Universal Threat Classification System has been in place for over 12,000 standard cycles. Nothing, and I mean nothing, has ever broken our predictive algorithms before." Around the circular chamber, representatives from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations shifted nervously in their seats. The Galactic Council had convened dozens of emergency sessions over the millennia, but never for something like this. Never because their fundamental understanding of galactic power structures was crumbling in real time. Admiral Theises of the Confederation Navy, his scaled hide bearing the ritual scarification of 100 victorious battles, leaned forward from his hovering command chair. "Arbitrator, perhaps you could explain exactly what we're dealing with? The emergency protocols you activated are reserved for extinction-level threats." Velinara's primary eyes flickered between the assembled delegates, while her secondary eyes remained fixed on the data streams. 3 standard days ago, our monitoring stations began receiving ... requests, asylum requests, from species that have never, in recorded history, requested protection from anyone. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems and the soft chiming of translator devices. Asylum requests were rare enough in galactic politics. Most species preferred to handle their problems internally rather than admit weakness. But asylum requests from apex predator species? That was unprecedented. "Show them," Velinara commanded, her voice barely above a whisper. The central holographic projector came to life, displaying a list that made several council members gasp audibly. The Vorthic Empire, acid-blooded hunters whose very presence could melt through most known materials. The Scaran Hive, a collective consciousness spanning billions of bioengineered warriors. The Nethi Shadow Lords, beings who existed partially outside normal space-time and could phase through solid matter at will. The Krillian Berserkers, 12-foot-tall warriors whose bone armor had never been penetrated by any known weapon. Name on the list represented a species that others had learned to fear, to avoid, to appease with tribute rather than face. In direct conflict. These were the monsters that parents across the galaxy used to frighten children into obedience. These were the apex predators that had carved out empires through sheer, overwhelming force, and every single one of them was begging for protection. Protection from what? Admiral Theises asked, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Velinara manipulated the display, bringing up a star chart that zoomed in on a relatively unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. A single yellow star glowed softly in the center of the projection, with several small planets orbiting it. The third planet from the star pulsed with a soft blue-green light. "They all mention the same system," she said quietly. "Sol, specifically the third planet. According to our intelligence classification, it's home to a species designated as Category 1. The silence that followed was deafening. Category 1 was the lowest possible threat rating in the galactic classification system. It was reserved for species that had barely achieved spaceflight, if they had achieved it at all. Species that posed no threat to anyone beyond their own planetary boundaries. "There must be some mistake," declared Counselor Zeth of the Unified Worlds. "Category 1 species are barely sapient. They're certainly not capable of threatening apex predators. That's what we thought, Velinara replied, her voice carrying a note of deep unease. So we decided to investigate. The display shifted again, this time showing a detailed breakdown of the species in question. Bipedal, carbon-based, average. Height of 1.7 meters, limited technological development. No significant space presence beyond their immediate solar system. By every metric the Galactic Council used to evaluate potential threats, the species called humans barely registered as a footnote in cosmic affairs. Their most advanced weapons still rely on chemical explosives and kinetic energy, Velinara continued, reading from the intelligence reports. They've achieved basic fusion power but haven't mastered antimatter. Their fastest ships take them months to travel between planets in their own system. They've never developed psionics, energy, manipulation, or dimensional technology. By every measurable standard, they should be completely irrelevant to galactic affairs. Counselor Zeth nodded approvingly. Exactly as I thought. Whatever those asylum seekers encountered, it couldn't have been these humans. Perhaps they stumbled into some kind of cosmic phenomenon in that region of space. But Admiral Theises was studying the data more carefully, his experienced military mind picking up on details that the politicians were missing. Arbitrator, this intelligence report, when was it compiled? Approximately 50 standard cycles ago, during our last comprehensive survey of uncontacted systems. And these asylum requests started arriving 3 days ago. Has anyone attempted to make contact with this human species to verify their current status? Velinara's translator device made a sound that roughly corresponded to nervous laughter. Admiral, with respect, what would be the point? Even if they've advanced significantly in 50 cycles, they're still a Category 1 species. What could they possibly have developed that would threaten beings like the Vorthok? As if summoned by the mention of their name, the chamber's doors irised open with a soft hiss. The figure that entered caused several council members to instinctively reach for personal defense systems before remembering that this was a diplomatic meeting. Warlord Zethkar of the Krillian Berserkers stood nearly 4 meters tall, his bone armor gleaming dully under the chamber's lights. Ritual scars covered every visible inch of his hide, each one representing a victory in personal combat. His 4 arms ended in claws that could rend most materials like paper, and his eyes glowed with the genetic modifications that gave his species perfect night vision and enhanced reaction times. He was also trembling, not the slight tremor of age or injury, but the deep, systemic shaking of a being who had looked into the abyss and found something looking back. His bone armor, reportedly unbreakable by any known weapon, showed fresh scratches and what appeared to be burn marks. Honored Council, Zethkar rumbled, his voice carrying harmonics that most species found deeply unsettling. I formally request immediate sanctuary for my remaining forces. We have encountered something beyond the scope of the Universal Threat Classification System. Admiral Theises leaned forward, his military instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. Warlord, your people are classified as Category 7 apex predators. What could possibly threaten your entire civilization? Zethkar's glow faded slightly, and when he spoke, his voice carried a note that none of them had ever heard from a Krillian before. Fear. Humans. The word hung in the air like a curse. Several council members exchanged glances, clearly wondering if the great warlord had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. Warlord, Velinara said carefully, our intelligence indicates that humans are a Category 1 species with limited technological development. Surely there's been some mistake. Zethkar's laugh was a sound like grinding stone. Your intelligence is 50 cycles old. Do you know what humans can accomplish in 50 cycles? He activated a personal holographic projector displaying images. That made several council members recoil in horror. The first image showed what had once been a Krillian war fortress, a massive structure designed to withstand orbital bombardment and siege warfare that could last for centuries. Now it was simply gone, reduced to a perfectly spherical crater that looked as if reality itself had been scooped out of existence. They did this with a single projectile, Zethkar said quietly. No energy signature, no exotic matter. No dimensional manipulation, just kinetic force applied with such precision and power that it ignored our shields, our armor, our defenses entirely. The next image showed Krillian warriors, beings who had never retreated from any battle in recorded history, fleeing in obvious panic from something the camera couldn't quite capture. Just the suggestion of movement at the edge of the frame. And the greatest warriors in the galaxy running like frightened children. We thought we were investigating reports of a minor territorial dispute in the Sol system, Zethkar continued. We arrived with a full war fleet, expecting to either demand tribute or eliminate another insignificant species. What we found ... double quotes, he paused, his glow dimming further. What we found were beings who fight like us, but worse. Beings who see conflict, not as a necessary evil or a path to glory, but as a problem to be solved with maximum efficiency. Admiral Theises felt a chill run down his spine. In military circles, there was a saying, "Beware the warrior who fights not for honor or glory, but because he sees violence as simply another tool." Such beings were unpredictable, unstoppable, and utterly without mercy. They didn't just defeat us, Zethkar said, his voice barely audible now. They didn't even seem to consider it a real fight. It was like ... like watching a parent discipline an unruly child. Necessary, efficient, and carried out with complete confidence in the outcome. Before anyone could respond, another set of doors opened, and a sight even more disturbing than a terrified Krillian entered the chamber. Queen Mind Veltara of the Scaran Hive floated into the room, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into dancing rainbows. But the usual harmonic chorus of the hive mind was absent, replaced by discordant notes that spoke of massive psychological trauma. The Scaran Hive was perhaps the most alien of all known species, a collective consciousness that spanned billions of individual organisms across hundreds of worlds. They communicated through quantum entanglement, thought in parallel processing streams that could solve problems no individual mind could comprehend, and had never, in their millennia of existence, expressed individual fear. Veltara was broadcasting pure terror across every frequency her species used for communication. "Council," she said, her voice carrying the weight of billions of minds speaking in unison, "we must warn the galaxy. The humans are not what they appear to be." Velinara activated her translator's priority override. "Queen Mind, you've encountered." "The humans as well?" "Encountered." The word came out as a discordant note that made everyone in the chamber wince. "We tried to incorporate them. Standard hive protocol when we discover a species with useful traits. We sent our integration swarms to their homeworld. The Scaran integration swarms were legendary throughout the galaxy. Billions of microscopic organisms that could infiltrate any biological system, analyze its strengths and weaknesses, and either absorb useful genetic material or eliminate threats to the hive. They had never failed to either assimilate or destroy their targets. 97% casualties, Veltara continued, her form flickering with the strain of processing such traumatic data. The human's planet is ... hostile to all life, including life that has been specifically engineered to be hostile to everything else. She activated her own holographic display, showing images that defied comprehension. The first showed what appeared to be a normal terrestrial world, blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. It looked peaceful, even welcoming. This is their homeworld. Our initial assessment classified it as a standard M-class planet suitable for carbon-based life. We prepared our standard assimilation protocols. The image shifted, zooming in on the planetary surface. We were wrong. The next series of images showed Scaran bioforms creatures, engineered specifically to survive in any environment, dying in agony on Earth's surface. Not from weapons or deliberate attacks, but from the planet itself. Their atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, Veltara explained, her mental voice conveying the kind of horror usually reserved for cosmic-scale disasters. Free oxygen is one of the most corrosive substances in the universe. Their entire biosphere is built around a chemical process that would be considered toxic to most life forms. Admiral Thizes found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. Queen Mind, surely your bioforms are engineered to handle various atmospheric compositions? Our organisms can survive in vacuum, in acid baths, in radiation fields that would sterilize most worlds, Veltara replied. But this planet ... everything is trying to kill everything else. The plants produce toxins. The animals hunt in coordinated groups. The weather systems generate kinetic forces that rival orbital bombardments. And the humans? Her form flickered more rapidly now, the quantum frequencies that carried her consciousness becoming increasingly unstable. The humans live there, not just survive, they thrive. They turned a death world into a garden and made themselves its apex predator. And when our swarms tried to integrate them, she paused, the silence filled with the discordant harmonics of a collective mind trying to process the impossible. They fought back. Not with technology or psionics or energy manipulation. They fought with sticks and stones and burning liquids and metal projectiles and coordinated packtacks and the words came faster now, spilling out like a dam bursting. They turned our own biological advantages against us. They learned our weaknesses in real time during combat. They adapted faster than we could modify our organisms. She displayed another image, a human settlement, peaceful and pastoral, with gardens and what appeared to be recreational areas. But Admiral Tice's trained eye caught the details that civilian observers might miss. The gardens weren't just decorative, they were positioned to provide clear fields of fire. The recreational areas could serve as staging grounds for defensive operations. Every building was positioned to support interlocking defensive patterns. They've turned their entire planet into a fortress, Veltara continued. But they did it so subtly, so naturally, that they probably don't even realize they've done it. To them, this is just normal planetary development. A new voice cut through the chamber's atmosphere like a blade through silk. Normal is not the word I would use. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees as Shadow Lord Nithros materialized, not entered, but literally faded into existence as if he had been there all along and simply chosen to become visible. The Nethys. Shadow Lords were beings who existed partially outside normal space-time, able to phase between dimensions at will. They were the galaxy's premier assassins, spies, and infiltrators. Nithros looked like a living shadow wrapped around a vaguely humanoid frame, with eyes that gleamed like distant stars in the depths of space. When he spoke, his words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I have observed the humans for 3 standard days, he said, his voice carrying harmonics that existed in frequencies most species couldn't even perceive. I have walked unseen through their cities, their homes, their military installations. I have watched them in their most private moments, their most vulnerable states. He paused, and for a moment his form became even less solid, as if the memory was causing him to lose cohesion with baseline reality. They cannot detect us when we phase shift, he continued. This has been true for every species we have encountered in 15,000 years of existence, but the humans, they know we are there. Admiral Theises felt the familiar chill of professional recognition. How? We do not know. They possess no psionic abilities. They have no dimensional technology. They show no signs of enhanced sensory capabilities. But they know. A human child will look directly at a location where one of my people is observing from a phased state and say, "Someone's watching me." A human security guard will investigate areas where we have passed through, even though we leave no trace of our presence. Nithro's cess form flickered more rapidly now, betraying an emotional state that his species rarely displayed. But that is not the worst part. The worst part is that they do not seem to consider this unusual. When a human detects our presence, they do not panic or call for assistance or attempt to flee. They simply adjust their behavior accordingly, as if being watched by invisible beings is simply another part of their daily routine. He activated a projection device that seemed to pull light from the shadows themselves, displaying images of human settlements from perspectives that should have been impossible to achieve. The images showed humans going about their daily lives, working, playing, eating, sleeping, but with a constant undercurrent of awareness that spoke to reflexes honed by millions of years of being prey. They live their entire lives as if they are being hunted, Nithro said quietly, not in fear, but in readiness. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest adult, maintains a constant state of situational awareness that rivals our most elite operatives. They scan for threats continuously, unconsciously, automatically. He zoomed in on a particular image, a human family sharing a meal in what appeared to be a peaceful domestic setting. But the Shadow Lord's enhanced vision revealed details that were deeply unsettling. Every family member was positioned to have a clear view of all entrances. Their eating utensils were held in grips that could quickly transition to defensive positions. Even in their most relaxed state, they were ready for violence. "This is how they eat dinner," Nithro said, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been awe or terror or both. "This is their idea of a peaceful family gathering. And they do this not because they are trained warriors or professional soldiers, but because this is simply how humans exist in the world." Velinara's forearms moved in agitation as she processed this information. "But Shadow Lord, surely this is just the behavior of a primitive species that hasn't learned to live in civilized society? Many pre-spaceflight cultures exhibit hypervigilance as a survival trait." Nithro's laugh was like the sound of wind through empty spaces. "Arbitrator, you misunderstand. This is not primitive behavior. This is not hypervigilance born of ignorance or fear. This is something far more sophisticated and far more dangerous." He changed the display, showing human cities from above. The urban planning was unlike anything the Council had seen before, not the efficient, logical layouts that most advanced species favored, but something organic and chaotic that somehow managed to be more effective than rigid geometric patterns. "Their cities grow like living organisms," he explained, "but they grow according to principles that we can barely comprehend. Every street, every building, every public space is designed to facilitate rapid movement and defensive positioning. But they do this unconsciously, naturally, as if the ability to turn any environment into a tactical advantage is simply part of their fundamental nature." Admiral Theises was studying the images with the eyes of someone who had spent centuries studying military architecture. What he saw made his scales ripple with involuntary fear responses. "Those aren't cities," he said quietly. "Those are fortifications. But they're fortifications designed by a species that doesn't think of them as fortifications. They think of them as normal." "Precisely," Nithros replied. "And that is what makes them so terrifying. They have weaponized their entire civilization without even realizing they have done so. Their art depicts violence. Their entertainment simulates conflict. Their sports are ritualized combat. Their children's games teach tactical thinking and resource management. He displayed a series of images showing human recreational activities, games, sports, entertainment. To the alien observers, it looked like a species that had turned preparation for warfare into their primary form of amusement. But here is what makes them truly impossible to understand, Nithros continued. They do all of this. They live their entire lives in a constant state of readiness for conflict, and yet they are genuinely confused when other species find them threatening. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this sank in. A species that had evolved into perfect warriors but didn't think of themselves as warriors. Beings who had turned their entire existence into a weapon but considered themselves peaceful. Counselor, Zeth broke the silence with a question that voiced what everyone was thinking. Shadow Lord, in your professional opinion, what threat level should we assign to this species? Mithro's S-form became more solid for a moment, as if he was drawing himself fully into baseline reality to emphasize the importance of his words. There is no threat level adequate to describe them, he said. They exist outside our classification system entirely. They are simultaneously the most dangerous species we have ever encountered and completely unaware that they are dangerous. They have evolved beyond our ability to categorize or predict or understand. High Arbitrator Velanara felt the weight of galactic civilization pressing down on her shoulders. In the space of a few hours, everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about the universe had been turned upside down. The most feared species in the galaxy were fleeing from beings that their own intelligence services had classified as harmless. "What do you recommend?" she asked. Though she dreaded the answer. It was Warlord Zethkar who responded, his massive form still trembling with residual trauma. "Contact them, but do it carefully, do it respectfully, and do it with the understanding that we are not approaching. Category 1 primitives." He stood to his full height, his bone armor catching the chamber's lights. "We are making first contact with apex predators who have somehow convinced themselves they are herbivores." 3 days later, the UES Endurance cruised through the outer reaches of the Sol system on what Captain Alina Rodriguez considered to be the most routine patrol of her career. The deep space monitoring arrays had detected some unusual energy signatures near the asteroid belt, but that was hardly unprecedented. Solar flares, cosmic radiation, and the occasional meteorite created false alarms on a daily basis. Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the familiar dance of planets and asteroids through the main viewport. After 15 years, in the Space Force, she had seen this view thousands of times, but it never failed to impress her. Humanity had come so far in just a few decades. From a species barely capable of reaching their own moon to explorers pushing the boundaries of their solar system. "Captain," Lieutenant Sarah Kim called from the sensor station, "I'm picking up something odd." Multiple contacts approaching from outside the system. Rodriguez moved to Kim's station, studying the holographic displays that showed the incoming objects. Large, definitely artificial, and moving under power rather than following ballistic trajectories. "How many?" 15 confirmed contacts, with more appearing as they get closer. "Captain, these aren't human ships." The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. This was the moment every human in space had been trained for but never quite believed would happen. "First contact with alien intelligence. Analysis?" Rodriguez asked, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "They're big," Kim replied, her fingers dancing over her controls. "The smallest one is easily 3 times the size of a heavy cruiser. And Captain, they're not approaching aggressively. Their formation suggests a diplomatic or exploratory mission rather than an attack fleet. Dr. James Park, the mission's xenobiologist, practically bounced with excitement as he joined them at the sensor station. This is incredible. Do you realize what this means? We're about to make first contact with an alien civilization. This will change everything. Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile at Park's enthusiasm, but her military training kept her focused on the practical considerations. Lieutenant Kim, open a channel on all frequencies. Let's see if they want to talk. The communication array came online with a soft chime, broadcasting a carefully prepared first contact message in multiple languages and mathematical concepts. The response came almost immediately, a complex signal that their translation computers began analyzing in real time. Within minutes, a holographic projection materialized on the bridge, showing what appeared to be a delegation of alien beings. Rodriguez had to suppress a gasp at the diversity represented in the group. Tall, crystalline beings that seemed to be made of living light. Insectoid creatures with multiple arms and compound eyes. Shadow-like figures that seemed to exist only partially in normal space. And towering above them all, a massive humanoid figure covered in what looked like natural armor. The largest figure stepped forward, and when it spoke, the translation system rendered its words in crisp, clear English. Greetings, humans of the Sol System. I am Warlord Zefkar of the Krillian Berserkers. We come seeking peaceful contact and understanding. Rodriguez exchanged glances with Dr. Park, who was frantically taking notes on everything he observed. The fact that the aliens had learned their language and were approaching peacefully was encouraging, but something about the tone of the message suggested there was more to this encounter than simple exploration. Warlord Zethkar, Rodriguez replied. I am Captain Elena Rodriguez of the United Earth Space Force. We welcome peaceful contact with your people. What brings you to our system? There was a pause that stretched just a moment too long, and Rodriguez caught what might have been nervous glances exchanged between the alien delegates. We come to verify certain information about your species, Zefkar replied carefully. There have been reports, stories that we find difficult to believe. We hope you might help us understand the truth about humanity. Dr. Park stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. We'd be honored to share information about our culture and history. This is exactly the kind of exchange we've dreamed of. The reaction from the alien delegation was immediate and unexpected. Several of them seemed to recoil slightly, and Rodriguez could have sworn she heard what sounded like nervous whispers from their communication channel. Dr. Park, she said quietly, perhaps we should establish some basic protocols before we start sharing detailed information. But Park was already pulling up holographic displays showing human art, architecture, and cultural achievements. Look at this. Here's our music, our literature, our scientific discoveries, and this is just from the last century. We have thousands of years of recorded history to share. Zethkar's massive form seemed to grow more tense as he studied the displays. Dr. Park, these images you show us ... This is your entertainment? Well, some of it, Park replied enthusiastically. Here, let me show you our film industry. We've produced some amazing works of art that explore the human condition, our relationship with the universe, our hopes and fears. He activated another display showing movie posters and brief clips from what he considered to be humanity's finest cinematic achievements. Alien, The Terminator, Predator, The Thing, Independence Day, War of the Worlds. To Park, these were examples of human creativity and imagination. To the alien observers, they looked like something else entirely. These are instructional materials? Asked one of the crystalline beings, her harmonic voice carrying a note of barely controlled panic. Educational, in a sense, Park replied, completely missing the underlying tension. They explore scenarios where humanity faces existential threats and has to find ways to survive and overcome impossible odds. They're quite popular because they showcase human ingenuity and determination. Rodriguez was beginning to sense that something was going wrong with this cultural exchange, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what. The alien delegates were becoming increasingly agitated as Park continued his enthusiastic presentation. And this one is particularly interesting, Park continued, displaying a poster for Alien. It depicts humans trapped in an enclosed space with a nearly perfect predator. The protagonist has to use intelligence, resourcefulness, and sheer determination to survive against something that seems designed specifically to kill her. Zefkar's voice was barely above a whisper when he asked, "And this is ... entertainment? Your people watch this for pleasure?" "Oh yes, it's considered a classic. The tension, the psychological horror, the way the protagonist never gives up even when facing certain death, it really captures something essential about the human spirit." The shadow-like figure that Rodriguez had noted earlier seemed to become even less solid, as if the very concept of humans creating entertainment about fighting perfect predators was causing it existential distress. "Dr. Park," Rodriguez interjected, finally recognizing that their guests were becoming increasingly disturbed. "Perhaps we should focus on more peaceful aspects of human culture." "Of course," Park replied, switching to a new set of displays. "Let me show you some of our historical documentaries. This one covers human conflict resolution and our journey toward global cooperation." He activated a display showing scenes from World War II, images of D-Day, the liberation of concentration camps, the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. To Park, this was humanity learning to work together against tyranny and eventually creating international institutions to prevent future global conflicts. To the alien observers, it looked like documentation of a species that casually engaged in planetary-scale warfare as a method of problem-solving. "This is how your species resolves disputes?" asked the crystalline being, her harmonic voice now carrying overtones that the translation system rendered as horror. "Well, this was how we used to resolve some disputes," Park replied, still not recognizing the impact his presentation was having. "This particular conflict involved most of our planet and resulted in approximately 60 million casualties. But it taught us valuable lessons about the importance of international cooperation and the need for strong institutions to prevent future conflicts." The silence that followed was deafening. Rodriguez realized that Park's innocent enthusiasm was somehow terrifying their alien guests, but she still didn't understand why. 60 million casualties, Zefkar repeated slowly. "And you describe this as a learning experience." "Absolutely. It led directly to the formation of the United Nations, the establishment of international laws governing warfare, and a global commitment to human rights. Some historians argue that World War II was actually necessary for humanity to mature as a species and develop the institutions we needed for peaceful coexistence." Rodriguez watched in fascination as the alien delegates seemed to shrink back from the holographic displays. It was as if Park was showing them something fundamentally disturbing rather than sharing human history and culture. Dr. Park, meanwhile, was warming to his subject. "Of course, the atomic weapons were unfortunate, but they did demonstrate the destructive potential of our technology and motivated us to develop strong international controls on nuclear proliferation. It's a perfect example of how humans can learn from their mistakes and create positive change." "You created weapons capable of destroying cities," the shadow-like figure whispered, its voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "And you used them on your own people." "Well, technically they were enemy populations at the time," Park replied with the casual tone of someone discussing ancient history. But yes, the destructive power was unprecedented. That's why we developed extensive safety protocols and international treaties to control their use. He activated another display showing modern Earth with its sprawling cities, international space stations, and global communication networks. See? We learned from our violent past and built a peaceful, cooperative civilization. What Park saw as evidence of human progress, the aliens seemed to interpret as something else entirely. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that their guests were experiencing some kind of profound culture shock, but she still couldn't fathom why stories of human development would be so disturbing to advanced alien civilizations. Dr. Park, she said carefully, perhaps our guests would be interested in seeing some of our current peaceful activities. Maybe we could show them our space exploration programs or our scientific research. Excellent idea. Park replied, switching to displays showing human space technology. Our current fleet of exploration vessels can travel anywhere in the solar system. We've established permanent bases on the Moon, Mars, and several asteroids. Our fastest ships can reach Jupiter in just 18 months. Zefkar studied the technical specifications that Park was enthusiastically displaying. These are your military vessels? Oh no, these are purely exploratory, Park replied. Though of course they do carry defensive systems in case of emergencies. You can never be too careful in space. Rodriguez felt a chill as she realized what their guests might be seeing in these supposedly peaceful displays. Human exploration ships bristling with what could be interpreted as weapon systems. Bases on multiple worlds that could serve as strategic outposts. A species that had achieved interplanetary capabilities and was rapidly expanding throughout their star system. Dr. Park, she said quickly, why don't we invite our guests aboard for a proper tour? I'm sure they'd be interested in seeing our facilities firsthand. The reaction from the alien delegation was immediate and unanimous. Every single one of them took a step backward, their various forms of body language radiating alarm. That's very generous, Zefkar said carefully, but perhaps we should continue our discussions remotely for now. We wouldn't want to impose on your time or resources. Rodriguez realized that their guests were actually afraid to board a human ship, advanced alien civilizations that had traveled across the galaxy. To meet them were too frightened to accept a simple invitation for a tour. Warlord Zefkar, she said gently, I sense that there may be some kind of misunderstanding here. Is there something about our presentation that concerns you? Another long pause, filled with what sounded like urgent whispered conversations between the alien delegates. Captain Rodriguez, Zefkar finally replied, before we continue, we would like to ask you a direct question. In your own words, how would you describe humanity's approach to conflict resolution? Rodriguez considered the question carefully. It seemed like an odd thing to focus on during a first contact scenario, but she wanted to be honest and helpful. Well, I suppose I'd say that humans prefer to solve problems through negotiation and cooperation when possible, she began, but we're also prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. Our history has taught us that sometimes peaceful solutions aren't possible, and in those cases, we believe in using decisive action to end conflicts as quickly as possible. The alien delegates exchanged what could only be described as meaningful looks. And when you say decisive action, the crystalline being asked, what exactly do you mean? Rodriguez felt like she was walking through a minefield, but she couldn't understand why such straightforward questions seemed to be causing so much distress. We mean that we commit fully to whatever course of action we decide is necessary, she replied. Human military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force, rapid escalation, and complete victory. We've learned that half measures tend to prolong conflicts and increase casualties on both sides. The silence that followed was so profound that Rodriguez began to wonder if their communication system had malfunctioned. "Captain," Dr. Park whispered, "I think we may be frightening them somehow." Rodriguez was beginning to reach the same conclusion, but she still couldn't understand why. Everything they had shared was simply factual information about human history and culture. These were advanced alien civilizations. Surely they had their own histories of conflict and development. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "you could tell. U.S. something about your own civilizations? We'd be very interested to learn about your histories and cultures." Zethkar's response was immediate and revealing. "Our species has engaged in warfare for territory and resources. Your species appears to engage in warfare for philosophical concepts." Rodriguez blinked in confusion. "I'm not sure I understand the distinction." "Captain," the shadow-like figure interjected, "in our brief study of your historical records, we have observed that humans will fight and die for abstract ideas. Honor, freedom, justice, dignity. These are not tangible resources that can be acquired through conquest." "Well, yes," Rodriguez replied, still not understanding why this was significant. "Those things are important to us. We believe some principles are worth fighting for, even if we can't physically possess them." The alien delegate seemed to shrink back even further from this casual statement. Rodriguez was beginning to feel like she was trapped in some kind of bizarre nightmare where everything she said made the situation worse. But she had no idea why. Dr. Park, meanwhile, was frantically reviewing his cultural exchange materials, trying to figure out what had gone wrong with what should have been a straightforward first contact scenario. "Perhaps," he said hopefully, "we could focus on our peaceful achievements, our art, our music, our scientific discoveries." "Yes," Zethkar said quickly, clearly grasping at any opportunity to steer the conversation away from human approaches to conflict. "Please, tell us about your scientific research." Park brightened immediately, pulling up displays showing humanity's greatest scientific achievements: the conquest of disease, the mastery of atomic energy, the development of space travel, the mapping of the human genome. "One of our proudest achievements," he said enthusiastically, "is our medical technology. We've eliminated most diseases that once plagued our species, developed surgical techniques that can repair almost any injury, and extended human lifespan significantly." He displayed images of modern hospitals, surgical procedures, and medical research facilities. To Park, these represented humanity's compassion and dedication to preserving life. To the alien observers, they looked like something else entirely. "You cut into living beings?" asked the crystalline being, her harmonic voice now carrying frequencies that the translation system couldn't even process. "Well, yes, that's how surgery works," Park replied, confused by the question. "We can replace hearts, lungs, kidneys, even sections of the brain. We've developed techniques for reattaching severed limbs, transplanting organs between individuals, and using artificial devices to replace damaged body parts." He activated a video showing a routine cardiac surgery, the camera following the surgeons. Precise movements as they stopped a human heart, repaired the damaged tissue, and restarted it. "This is considered normal medical practice?" Zethkar asked, his massive form trembling slightly. "Oh yes, this is just a standard procedure. We perform thousands of these every day across the globe. The patient will be back to normal activities within a few weeks." Rodriguez was watching the alien delegates with growing concern. They were displaying what could only be described as horror at the sight of routine medical procedures. It was as if they had never encountered the concept of surgery before. "Dr. Park," she said quietly, "perhaps we should explain the context a bit more?" "Of course," Park replied, switching to educational materials. "You see, humans have always been very proactive about health and survival. When our bodies are damaged, we don't just accept it. We find ways to fix the problem. He displayed a series of images showing the evolution of human medicine from primitive healing practices to modern trauma surgery. We've developed the ability to keep humans alive even when they've suffered injuries that would normally be fatal. Massive blood loss, organ failure, even complete cardiac arrest, we have techniques for dealing with all of these situations. The shadow-like figure seemed to become even less substantial, as if the very concept of humans refusing to accept death was causing it to lose cohesion with reality. "You fight death itself," it whispered. "Well, yes," Park replied, still not understanding why this was disturbing. "Humans don't like to give up. When something threatens us, disease, injury, even natural aging, we tend to see it as a problem to be solved rather than something to be accepted." Rodriguez was beginning to piece together what was happening. Somehow, everything that humans considered normal and admirable was being interpreted as threatening by their alien guests. But she still couldn't understand why advanced civilizations would be disturbed by medical technology and human determination. "Perhaps," she suggested, "we could visit Earth? You could see our civilization firsthand and understand that we're a peaceful people." The reaction was immediate and unanimous. Every alien delegate took several steps backward, their various forms of body language radiating absolute terror. "Visit your homeworld?" Zethkar said, his voice barely controlled. "Captain, with all respect, that would be inadvisable." "Why?" Rodriguez asked, genuinely confused. "Earth is beautiful. We'd be honored to host representatives from your civilizations." The crystalline being's harmonic voice became so distorted that the translation system struggled to process it. "Captain, we have reviewed your planetary specifications. Your world is classified as a Class 12 death world." "I'm sorry, a what?" Dr. Park looked up from his displays, equally confused. "What's a death world?" The alien delegates exchanged what could only be described as incredulous looks. "A planet hostile to most forms of life," the shadow-like figure explained. "Extreme weather patterns, geological instability, toxic atmospheric components, aggressive native species. Your Earth scores higher on the Planetary Danger Index than any inhabited world in our databases." Rodriguez felt a laugh bubbling up in her throat. "You think Earth is dangerous?" "Captain," Zethkar said solemnly, "your planet's atmosphere contains 21% free oxygen. That's an extremely corrosive gas that's toxic to most life forms. Your weather systems generate kinetic forces equivalent to orbital bombardments. Your geological activity could destroy entire cities without warning. And that's before we consider your native biology." "Our native biology?" Park asked, his scientific curiosity overriding his confusion. "Your planet is inhabited by millions of species, most of which seem to be engaged in constant warfare for survival," the crystalline being explained. "Predators, parasites, venomous creatures, disease organisms. Everything on your world appears to be trying to kill everything else." Rodriguez stared at them in amazement. "You're talking about Earth's ecosystem." "That's just nature. Just nature," Zethkar repeated slowly. "Captain, most inhabited worlds have perhaps a few dozen species of what you might call dangerous organisms. Your world has thousands. And humans live there not just safely, but comfortably." "Of course we do," Rodriguez replied. "It's our home. We evolved there." The silence that followed was so profound that Rodriguez began to wonder if she had said something offensive. "You evolved there," the shadow-like figure said finally. "On a Class 12 death world, you evolved not just to survive, but to become the dominant species." "Well, yes," Park said, still not understanding why this was significant. "Humans are pretty adaptable. We live in every climate zone on Earth, from tropical rainforests to Arctic tundra. We've learned to thrive in environments that were initially hostile to us. He activated a display showing human settlements in various extreme environments, Antarctic research stations, deep ocean facilities, high-altitude mountain communities. See, we don't let environmental challenges stop us. When we encounter a problem, we find a way to solve it. The alien delegates were now displaying what could only be described as existential dread. You colonize hostile environments for scientific research, Sethkar said, his voice carrying a note of awe and terror. Among other things, Rodriguez replied, we also do it because it's there. Humans have always been explorers. If there's somewhere we haven't been, we want to go there and see what we can learn. Even if it might kill you? Especially if it might kill us, Park said cheerfully. The most dangerous places often teach us the most about ourselves and our capabilities. Rodriguez was beginning to realize that every single thing they said was somehow making the situation worse, but she still couldn't understand why. To her, they were simply describing normal human behavior and attitudes. Dr. Park, she said carefully, perhaps we should focus on our peaceful activities. Our arts, our culture, our recreational pursuits. Excellent idea, Park replied, switching to displays showing human sports and entertainment. Humans have developed a wide variety of recreational activities to help us relax and enjoy ourselves. He activated videos showing football, boxing, martial arts, rock climbing, bungee jumping, and extreme sports competitions. These are your relaxation activities? The crystalline being asked, her harmonic voice now so distorted it was barely comprehensible. Well, some of them, Park replied. We have a saying, work hard, play hard. Humans tend to approach our leisure time with the same intensity we bring to everything else. Rodriguez watched in fascination as the alien delegates seemed to huddle together, as if seeking comfort from each other in the face of something too terrible to contemplate alone. Dr. Park, she said quietly, I think we may need to reconsider our presentation. But Park was already moving on to the next section of his cultural exchange materials. And here's something really interesting, human children's games and educational activities. He displayed images of playgrounds, sports, competitions, and what he considered to be wholesome childhood activities. Tag, hide and seek, capture the flag, paintball, video games. Human children learn important social skills through play, he explained. These activities teach cooperation, strategic thinking, physical coordination, and healthy competition. 2. The alien observers, it looked like a species that trained its offspring for warfare from birth. Your children practice stealth, evasion, territorial control, and simulated combat, Sethkar said, his voice barely above a whisper. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds much more serious than it is, Park replied with a laugh. They're just games. Human children have been playing these kinds of activities for thousands of years. Thousands of years of training your young for conflict scenarios, the shadow-like figure observed, Rodriguez, was beginning to understand that there was a fundamental disconnect between how humans viewed their own culture and how these alien civilizations were interpreting it. Everything that seemed normal and healthy to humans appeared threatening and militaristic to their guests. I think, she said carefully, that we may have some basic misunderstandings about each other's perspectives. Perhaps we should start with some simpler exchanges of information. Yes, Sethkar agreed quickly. Perhaps you could tell us about your domestic arrangements. How do humans live in peaceful times? Rodriguez smiled, relieved to finally have a topic that couldn't possibly be controversial. Of course. Doctor Park, why don't you show them some typical human families and communities? Park activated displays showing suburban neighborhoods, family gatherings, and domestic life. To human eyes, these were images of peace, prosperity, and social harmony. Alien delegates' reaction suggested they were seeing something entirely different. Your domestic units are heavily fortified, the crystalline being observed. Rodriguez looked at the images with fresh eyes, trying to see what their guests were seeing. Normal suburban houses with yards, fences, and security systems. Those aren't fortifications, she said. Those are just homes. With defensive perimeters, surveillance systems, and multiple exit routes, Zethkar noted. Well, yes, people like privacy and security, Rodriguez replied, beginning to understand how human normalcy might appear to alien observers. Dr. Park, meanwhile, was displaying images of family barbecues, backyard parties, and community gatherings. See? Humans are very social. We enjoy spending time together, sharing food, and celebrating important events. You gather in large groups to consume other organisms, the shadow-like figure said, its voice carrying harmonics of horror. We eat food, yes, Park replied, confused. By the phrasing, humans are omnivores. We eat plants and animals. He activated additional displays showing human agriculture and food production. To him, these were examples of human ingenuity and efficiency in meeting basic needs. You have domesticated other species for consumption, Zethkar said, studying the images of cattle ranches and poultry farms. You breed them specifically to be killed and eaten. Well, yes, that's how agriculture works, Park replied, still not understanding why this was disturbing. Humans learned to control our food supply thousands of years ago. It's one of the foundations of civilization. The alien delegates seemed to be struggling with the concept of deliberately breeding other life forms for the purpose of consuming them. But some of these creatures, the crystalline being said, pointing to images of cattle, they appeared to be quite large, potentially dangerous. Oh, cattle are completely harmless, Rodriguez said. We've bred them to be docile and manageable. They're basically living food production systems. The silence that followed was so complete that Rodriguez could hear the hum of the ship's environmental systems. You engineered other species to be helpless, the shadow-like figure said finally. We domesticated them, Park corrected. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. We provide food, shelter, and protection, and they provide, well, food. You provide protection from what? Park activated displays showing predator control measures on farms and ranches. Oh, you know, natural predators. Wolves, coyotes, bears, big cats. Things that might threaten livestock. So you protect these helpless creatures from the natural predators of your death world so that you can kill them yourself. Rodriguez was beginning to realize that every aspect of human civilization that seemed normal and sensible to her was being interpreted as evidence of something sinister by their alien guests. It's not sinister, she said, trying to address what she thought might be their concerns. It's just efficient. Humans learned long ago that we could meet our needs more effectively through planning and organization rather than just hunting wild animals. You replaced random predation with systematic harvesting, Zethkar observed. I suppose that's one way to put it, Rodriguez replied, though the phrasing made her uncomfortable. Dr. Park, meanwhile, was trying to steer the conversation back to what he considered more positive aspects of human culture. Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing our recreational facilities? Humans have developed many activities that bring us joy and relaxation. He activated displays showing zoos, aquariums, and wildlife parks. These are your entertainment centers? The crystalline being asked. Some of them, Park replied enthusiastically. We enjoy observing and learning about other species. These facilities allow us to study animals from all over the world in controlled environments. To the alien observers, it looked like a species that captured and imprisoned other life forms for amusement. You keep other sentient beings in cages for your entertainment. The shadow-like figure said, its voice carrying frequencies that suggested profound disturbance. They're not sentient in the way we are, Park replied, though he was beginning to sense that this explanation wasn't helping. And modern zoos are focused on education and conservation. We're trying to protect endangered species and teach people about the importance of biodiversity. You display captured creatures to educate your young about the superiority of your species, Zethkar interpreted. Rodriguez felt a headache building behind her eyes. Every single thing they shared about human culture was being viewed through a lens that made them appear to be monsters. I think, she said carefully, that we may have some fundamental differences in how we interpret behavior and motivations. Perhaps we should take a step back and try to understand each other's perspectives better. Yes, Zethkar agreed immediately. Perhaps you could tell us about human conflict resolution without involving ... examples. Rodriguez considered this carefully. Well, humans generally prefer to solve disputes through negotiation and compromise. We've developed extensive legal systems, international organizations, and diplomatic protocols specifically to avoid conflicts. And when those methods fail, the crystalline being asked, then we use whatever means are necessary to protect ourselves and the people we care about. Whatever means are necessary, Zethkar repeated slowly. Within the bounds of law and ethics, of course, Rodriguez added quickly. Humans have developed extensive rules about the conduct of warfare, the treatment of civilians, and the protection of non-combatants. You have rules for warfare, the shadow-like figure observed. Yes, the Geneva Conventions, the laws of armed conflict, various international treaties and agreements. We've learned that even in conflict, there need to be limits on acceptable behavior. The alien delegates exchanged looks that Rodriguez was beginning to recognize as their equivalent of nervous whispers. Captain, Zethkar said carefully, these rules you mention, are they generally followed? Most of the time, Rodriguez replied honestly. There are violations, of course, and we have international courts and enforcement mechanisms to deal with those. But overall, yes. Most human military forces follow the established laws of warfare. And what happens to those who violate these laws? They're prosecuted for war crimes. Depending on the severity of their actions, they might face imprisonment, financial penalties, or in extreme cases, execution. The silence that followed was so profound that Rodriguez began to wonder if their communication system had failed again. You execute your own people for violating the rules of warfare, the crystalline being said finally. Only in the most extreme cases, Rodriguez replied, sensing that she was walking through another minefield but not understanding why. And only after extensive legal proceedings with full due process protections. But the principle remains, Zethkar said. You will kill members of your own species for failing to follow proper procedures during conflicts. Rodriguez realized that what seemed like evidence of human civilization and legal development to her was being interpreted as evidence of cold-blooded ruthlessness by their alien guests. We believe in accountability, she said carefully. If someone commits atrocities in our name, they need to face the consequences of their actions. Dr. Park, who had been quietly reviewing his cultural exchange materials, looked up with an expression of dawning comprehension. Captain, he said quietly, I think I'm beginning to understand the problem. Everything we consider normal, our history, our culture, our way of life, they're interpreting as evidence that we're some kind of apex predator species. But we're not, Rodriguez protested. We're explorers, scientists, diplomats. We came out here to make friends, not to conquer anyone. Yes, Zethkar said, his massive form somehow managing to convey nervous agreement. That is what makes you so terrifying." Rodriguez stared at him in complete confusion. "I don't understand." "Captain," the shadow-like figure explained, "in our experience, apex predator species are driven by clear, understandable motivations. Territory, resources, reproduction, survival. But humans appear to be apex predators who are motivated by abstract concepts like curiosity, justice, and compassion." "And that makes us terrifying?" "That makes you unpredictable," the crystalline being said. "We can negotiate with species that want territory or resources. We cannot predict the behavior of a species that might risk their lives to help strangers, or might fight to the death to defend ideas." Rodriguez felt like she was trapped in some kind of surreal nightmare where everything that made humans admirable was being used as evidence that they were monsters. "But those are good qualities," she protested. "Curiosity drives scientific advancement. Justice creates stable societies. Compassion motivates us to help others." "Yes," Sethkar agreed. "And a species motivated by such concepts is capable of anything. You might cure diseases, or you might commit genocide, and the decision could be based on philosophical principles that other species cannot even comprehend." The alien delegates seemed to huddle closer together as if seeking comfort in the face of something too alien to understand. "Captain Rodriguez," the crystalline being said, her harmonic voice carrying frequencies of resignation, "we came here hoping to discover that the reports about your species were exaggerated. Instead, we have learned that they were understated." "What reports?" Rodriguez asked, though she was beginning to dread the answer. "That humans are a species of apex predators who have convinced themselves they are peaceful," Sethkar replied. "That you have weaponized your entire civilization without realizing it. That you exist in a constant state of readiness for conflict, while genuinely believing yourselves to be explorers and diplomats." Rodriguez felt the weight of the conversation settling on her shoulders. Everything they had shared, their history, their culture, their values, their way of life, had been interpreted as evidence of a fundamental threat to galactic civilization. "We never meant to seem threatening," she said quietly. "That," the shadow-like figure replied, "is what makes you most terrifying of all." 3 months later, the emergency session of the Galactic Council reconvened to address what had become known as the human problem. The data collected during the first contact mission had been analyzed, reanalyzed, and confirmed by multiple independent sources. The conclusion was inescapable and deeply disturbing. High Arbitrator Velanara stood before the assembled delegates, her 4 arms moving in patterns that conveyed both resignation and fear. "Honored members of the Council," she began, "we have completed our analysis of the species known as humans. Our conclusion is that they represent a type of threat we have never encountered before and for which our existing classification systems are inadequate." She activated the central holographic display, showing a comparative analysis of human capabilities versus known galactic standards. "Humans are not the most technologically advanced species we have encountered. They are not the most physically powerful. They are not the most psychically gifted. But they possess a combination of traits that makes them uniquely dangerous." The display shifted to show human population distribution across Earth. They have achieved global unity while maintaining cultural diversity. They have eliminated most internal conflicts while retaining the capacity for coordinated large-scale military action. They have developed technologies and tactics that treat their own homeworld as a training ground for survival in hostile environments. Admiral Vices leaned forward from his command chair. "Arbitrator, surely you're not suggesting that we classify them as a galactic threat? Our own observers confirm that they have no aggressive intentions toward other species." "That is precisely the problem, Admiral," Velanara replied. "They represent the most dangerous type of threat possible. an apex predator species that doesn't realize it's an apex predator. She displayed images from the cultural exchange with Captain Rodriguez and Dr. Park. They shared their military capabilities as examples of defensive systems. They describe planetary-scale warfare as learning experiences. They treat survival in environments that would kill most galactic species as recreational activities, and they do all of this with complete sincerity. Counselor Zeph spoke up from his position in the civilian sector, but surely their peaceful intentions count for something? If they don't want to conquer or dominate, what threat do they actually pose? It was Warlord Zefkar who answered, his Iskar who answered. It was Warlord Zefkar who answered, Sifing Tiving Chu Jin Jun Kansifse. Massive form still bearing the psychological scars of his encounter with human capabilities. Counselor, imagine a being so powerful that it could destroy you without effort, but so alien that you could never predict when or why it might choose to do so. Humans make decisions based on principles that we cannot understand and cannot predict. They might help you, or they might eliminate you, and the choice could be based on abstract concepts like justice or compassion that change meaning depending on context. Queen Mind Veltara's crystalline form flickered with the harmonics of billions of minds struggling to process the implications. The Hive has reached a consensus, she announced. Humans represent an existential threat not because of what they might do, but because of what we cannot predict they might do. A species that operates outside comprehensible motivational frameworks. Cannot be negotiated with, cannot be predicted, and cannot be contained. Shadow Lord Mithros materialized in the center of the chamber, his form more solid than anyone had ever seen it. We have observed them for 3 months, he reported. They continue to behave in ways that defy our understanding. They risk their lives to save individuals they have never met. They devote enormous resources to projects that provide no tangible benefit. They make decisions that appear to be emotionally driven but prove to be strategically sound. He paused, his form flickering with what might have been confusion. We cannot determine their objectives because they appear to operate according to principles rather than goals. This makes them impossible to counter or contain. High Arbitrator Velanara felt the weight of galactic civilization pressing down on her. In the span of a few months, everything the Council thought they knew about universal order had been turned upside down. The question before us, she said formally, is how to respond to this unprecedented situation. We cannot classify humans as hostile because they have shown no aggressive intentions. We cannot classify them as harmless because they clearly pose an existential threat. We cannot predict their behavior because they operate according to alien logic. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. For the first time in galactic history, we are faced with a species that we cannot categorize, cannot predict, and cannot understand. The usual frameworks for interspecies relations simply do not apply. Admiral Dizes consulted his tactical displays, his military mind working through scenarios that had no precedent in galactic history. Arbitrator, what are our options? We cannot simply ignore them. They are rapidly developing interstellar capabilities. Within a century, possibly less, they will be spreading throughout their local stellar region. And wherever they go, Zefkar added grimly, they will bring their incomprehensible motivations and unpredictable behaviors with them. The chamber fell silent as the assembled delegates contemplated a future where an incomprehensible apex predator species was loose in the galaxy. It was Counselor Zeth who finally voiced what everyone was thinking. What if we're approaching this wrong? What if instead of trying to contain or counter them, we tried to accommodate them? The reaction was immediate and universally negative. Several delegates began speaking at once, their various forms of body language radiating alarm and disbelief. Counselor Velanara said carefully, You're suggesting that we restructure galactic civilization around the unpredictable behavior patterns of a single species? I'm suggesting, Zeth replied, that we may not have a choice. If humans are truly as capable and unpredictable as our analysis suggests, then attempting to oppose them could trigger exactly the kind of conflict we're trying to avoid. He activated his own holographic display showing projections of human technological development over the next several centuries. They're going to expand into the galaxy whether we want them to or not. They're going to encounter other species whether we approve or not. They're going to make decisions based on their incomprehensible moral frameworks whether we understand them or not. The question is whether we want to be their enemies or their allies when that happens. Queen Mind Veltara's harmonics took on frequencies that suggested deep unease. Counselor Zeth raises a troubling point. The Hive's probability calculations suggest that any attempt to militarily contain humanity would result in unacceptable outcomes. Meaning? Admiral Thizes asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected the answer. Meaning, Veltara replied, that a species evolved on a Class 12 death world and motivated by abstract principles would likely view military containment as an existential threat and respond accordingly. The chamber fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications of going to war with beings who treated planetary-scale conflict as a learning experience. Shadow Lord Nithros spoke from the shadows, his voice carrying harmonics of something that might have been grim amusement. There is another consideration. Our observations suggest that humans form strong emotional attachments to other species that they perceive as allies. They will risk their lives to protect those they consider friends. And? Velinara prompted. And a species capable of treating their own planet as a training ground for survival in hostile environments would likely be very effective at protecting their allies from threats. The implications hung in the air like a slowly dawning revelation. A species too dangerous to fight might also be too valuable to alienate. Warlord Zethkar spoke into the silence, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won experience. Honored Council, I have faced humans in combat. I have seen what they are capable of when they perceive a threat to themselves or others. I do not recommend that experience to anyone. He paused, his massive form somehow conveying resignation. But I have also seen them offer medical assistance to wounded enemies. I have seen them risk their lives to rescue beings they had never met before. They are apex predators with a moral framework of something I do not have words for. Admiral Thizes was studying tactical projections, his military mind working through scenarios that violated every principle of strategic planning he had ever learned. If we assume that humans will continue to expand into the galaxy, and if we assume that they will eventually encounter our various civilizations, then our options are limited, he said finally. We can try to hide from them, try to fight them, or try to work with them. Hiding from a species that explores dangerous environments for recreation seems unlikely to succeed, Velinara observed. Fighting them appears to be inadvisable, which leaves working with them, Zethkar finished. Becoming allies with apex predators who don't realize they're apex predators. The silence that followed was filled with the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. It was Shadow Lord Nithros who finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking. Perhaps it is time for the galaxy to learn what it means to have humans as friends instead of enemies. 1 year later, the transformation was already becoming apparent. The Galactic Council had quietly restructured its entire diplomatic framework around what had become known as the human accommodation. Trade agreements were rewritten to favor species that maintained friendly relations with Earth. Military alliances were restructured to ensure that no one would accidentally find themselves in conflict with human interests. Most remarkably, the Galaxy's most feared species had become humanity's most enthusiastic supporters. The Vorthic Empire offered military alliance, their acid-blooded warriors eager to learn human tactical doctrines. The Scarenhive requested human advisors for conflict resolution, their collective intelligence fascinated by human approaches to problem-solving. The Nephis Shadow Lords emerged from hiding to trade stealth technology for human entertainment media, their psyche apparently craving the emotional complexity of human storytelling. Even the Krillian Berserkers, the galaxy's most feared warriors, had established cultural exchange programs with human military academies. Captain Elena Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral and serving as Earth's primary liaison to the Galactic Council, stood in her office aboard the newly constructed diplomatic station at the edge of the Sol system. Through the massive viewport, she could see ships from dozens of different species coming and going in a constant stream of interstellar commerce and cultural exchange. "Admiral," her aide announced, "the Galactic Council delegation has arrived for this month's coordination meeting." Rodriguez smiled, still finding it amusing that representatives from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations traveled all the way to the edge of human space for regular meetings. What had started as a simple first contact scenario had somehow evolved into Earth becoming the de facto center of galactic diplomacy. "Send them in," she said. The delegation that entered her office was now familiar. Warlord Zethkar, his massive form somehow less intimidating than it had been during their first meeting. Queen Mind Veltara, her crystalline structure now pulsing with harmonics that suggested contentment rather than terror. Shadow Lord Nithros, whose form had become noticeably more solid during his extended stays in human space. "Admiral Rodriguez," Zethkar greeted her, his voice carrying warmth that would have been unthinkable from a Krillian warrior a year ago. "We bring greetings from the Council and updates on the integration protocols." Rodriguez gestured to the conference area where they could all sit comfortably. "I hope the news is good. How are the various species adapting to the new frameworks?" "Better than expected," Veltara reported, her harmonics carrying frequencies of satisfaction. "The mortality rates from interspecies conflicts have dropped by 93% since the implementation of the human protocols." "The human protocols?" Rodriguez asked, raising an eyebrow. Nithros materialized more fully, his form almost entirely solid now. "Diplomatic guidelines based on human approaches to conflict resolution. When disputes arise, all parties are required to ask themselves, what would humans do in this situation?" Rodriguez felt a laugh bubbling up in her throat. "And that works?" "Remarkably well," Zethkar confirmed. "Most species are so terrified of accidentally provoking human intervention that they resolve their disputes through negotiation rather than risk drawing your attention." "But we're not intervening in anyone's disputes," Rodriguez protested. "We've made it clear that we prefer diplomatic solutions to all conflicts." The three alien delegates exchanged what had become a familiar look, the expression of beings trying to explain something obvious to someone who couldn't see it. "Admiral," Veltara said gently, "your species' reputation for thoroughness in conflict resolution has become something of a galactic legend. Thoroughness? The complete and decisive way you resolve problems," Nithros explained. "Other species have learned that it's better to solve their own disputes than risk having humans solve them." Rodriguez was beginning to understand that humanity's reputation in the galaxy was somewhat different from how humans saw themselves. "Are you saying that other species are behaving themselves because they're afraid of us?" "Afraid is not the right word," Zethkar said carefully. "Respectful, cautious, motivated to find peaceful solutions rather than risk complications." Before Rodriguez could respond, her aide announced another visitor. "Admiral, Dr. Park is here with the Cultural Exchange Report. Dr. James Park entered the office with his usual enthusiasm, carrying a tablet loaded with data from humanity's expanding cultural exchange programs. He had become something of a celebrity in the galactic community, though Rodriguez suspected he still didn't fully understand why. "Admiral, I have amazing news. The human entertainment industry has become the most popular cultural export in galactic history. Our movies, books, music, and games are being translated into thousands of languages across hundreds of species." "That's wonderful, James," Rodriguez replied. "Which genres are most popular?" "Well, that's the interesting part," Park said, consulting his tablet. "Our action movies are being used as training materials by military academies across the galaxy. Our horror films are considered educational documentaries about human survival techniques. Our science fiction is being studied by xenobiologists as examples of human creativity and problem solving." Rodriguez felt that familiar sense of unreality that had become common in her interactions with galactic civilization. "James, those are entertainment products. They're not meant to be instructional materials. Try telling that to the Galactic Military Academy," Park replied cheerfully. "They've made Die Hard required viewing for all command-level officers. Apparently, they consider it a masterclass in asymmetric warfare and resource management under Sejusman. Extreme conditions." Zethkar nodded approvingly. "An excellent educational film. The human protagonist demonstrates remarkable adaptability and tactical thinking while facing overwhelming odds. It's a Christmas movie about a cop trapped in a building with terrorists," Rodriguez said weakly. "Yes," Veltara agreed, her harmonics suggesting confusion. "Is that not what we said?" Rodriguez was beginning to realize that the cultural exchange between humanity and the galaxy was not proceeding quite as anyone had originally envisioned. "Dr. Park," she said carefully, "what about our more peaceful cultural products? Art, music, literature that doesn't involve conflict or survival scenarios?" "Oh, those are popular too," Park replied enthusiastically. "Human music is considered extremely sophisticated because of its emotional complexity. Our visual arts are studied as examples of pattern recognition and symbolic thinking, and our literature—" He paused, consulting his tablet. "Well, apparently our romantic comedies are being analyzed as examples of human psychological warfare techniques." "Psychological warfare?" Rodriguez asked, though she was no longer surprised by anything. The complexity of human emotional manipulation and social engineering displayed in your courtship rituals, Nithros explained matter-of-factly. The ability to predict and influence behavior through subtle psychological cues. The strategic deployment of humor and vulnerability to achieve desired outcomes. The long-term planning involved in pair bonding negotiations. Park looked confused. "They're talking about romantic comedies. You know, When Harry Met Sally, The Princess Bride, that sort of thing." "Yes," Veltara confirmed, her harmonics carrying notes of academic interest. "Sophisticated demonstrations of human ability to wage complex psychological campaigns over extended periods, while maintaining the appearance of casual social interaction." Rodriguez rubbed her temples, feeling a familiar headache building. "There. Love stories. They're about people falling in love and overcoming obstacles to be together." "Exactly," Zethkar agreed. "Humans demonstrate the ability to maintain complex deception scenarios, manipulate emotional responses, and coordinate multi-stage psychological operations, all while appearing to engage in simple social bonding. It's remarkably sophisticated. Doctor?" Park was frantically taking notes. "This is fascinating. I had no idea our cultural products were being interpreted this way. What about our children's programming? Surely that's seen as harmless?" The three alien delegates exchanged another one of their meaningful looks. "Dr. Park," Nithros said carefully, "your children's educational programming is perhaps the most disturbing of all. How can children's shows be disturbing? Because they demonstrate that humans begin training their offspring for complex survival scenarios from infancy," Veltara explained. "Your animated programming shows human children regularly facing existential threats, solving complex problems under pressure, and forming tactical alliances to overcome superior opponents." Park looked blank. "Are you talking about cartoons?" "Educational. Simulations," Zethkar corrected. "Programs that teach human larvae to remain calm under pressure, think creatively when facing overwhelming odds, and work cooperatively to achieve objectives despite facing apparently insurmountable challenges." Rodriguez was beginning to understand that every single aspect of human culture was being interpreted through a lens that made them appear to be a species of natural-born strategic thinkers. "What about our documentaries?" she asked, though she was beginning to dread the answer. "Surely those provide a more accurate picture of human nature?" Dr. Park consulted his tablet again. "Well, our nature documentaries are extremely popular, especially the ones narrated by David Attenborough. Apparently, they're considered masterclasses in strategic analysis and threat assessment." "How is David Attenborough's strategic analysis?" "The calm, analytical way he describes predator-prey relationships, survival strategies, and competitive resource allocation," Nithros explained. "His ability to predict animal behavior based on environmental factors and biological imperatives is considered evidence of advanced human tactical thinking." "And our historical documentaries," Veltara added, "are being studied as examples of human long-term strategic planning and adaptive problem-solving across multiple generations." Rodriguez felt like she was trapped in an alternate universe where everything humans did was interpreted as evidence of master-level strategic thinking. "What about our cooking shows?" she asked desperately. "Surely those can't be interpreted as military training." The silence that followed was telling. "Admiral," Zethkar said gently, "your cooking programs demonstrate human ability to transform potentially toxic organic matter into safe, nutritious, and palatable food using only basic tools and chemical knowledge." "And the competitive cooking shows," Park added, consulting his notes, "are apparently considered training exercises in resource management, time optimization, and performance under pressure." "They're just cooking competitions," Rodriguez protested weakly. "Simulated resource scarcity scenarios where humans must create optimal nutritional solutions within strict time constraints while being evaluated by experts," Veltara corrected. "The psychological pressure, the strategic ingredient selection, the temporal management skills, it's quite sophisticated training." Rodriguez slumped in her chair, finally understanding the full scope of how humanity was perceived by the galactic community. Every single thing they did, from entertainment to education to recreational activities, was being interpreted as evidence of a species-wide genius for strategic thinking and tactical planning. "Dr. Park," she said quietly, "please tell me that at least our reality TV shows are seen as mindless entertainment." Park's expression suggested that she was not going to like his answer. "Well, Admiral, shows like Survivor are considered advanced. Training in alliance formation, resource management, and psychological manipulation under extreme conditions. The Amazing Race is studied as an example of human ability to adapt to rapidly changing environments while maintaining team cohesion under stress." "And dating shows?" Rodriguez asked, though she already knew she didn't want to know. "Complex social engineering exercises demonstrating human mastery of psychological manipulation, strategic alliance formation, and long-term planning in competitive environments," Nithros replied promptly. Rodriguez looked around the room at the assembled aliens, all of whom were regarding humanity with a mixture of respect, fear, and fascination. Is there anything at all, that humans do that you consider normal, non-threatening behavior? The three delegates considered this question seriously for several moments. Your gardening programs are relatively peaceful, Veltara offered finally. Rodriguez felt a spark of hope. Yes. Gardening is just about growing plants and creating beautiful spaces. Although, Zethkar added thoughtfully, the systematic cultivation and genetic modification of plant species for optimal productivity does demonstrate impressive long-term biological engineering capabilities. And the way humans discuss soil, chemistry, pest management, and environmental optimization, Nithros continued, suggests a sophisticated understanding of ecosystem manipulation and biological warfare principles. Rodriguez's brief moment of hope died a quick death. Dr. Park, meanwhile, was looking through more of his cultural exchange data. Oh, this is interesting. Our meditation and mindfulness programs are becoming very popular across the galaxy. Finally, Rodriguez said with relief, something peaceful and non-threatening. Yes, Veltara agreed. The demonstration of human ability to maintain perfect mental discipline and emotional control under any circumstances is quite impressive. And the breathing techniques, Zethkar added, show remarkable mastery of physiological functions that most species consider involuntary. Plus, the way humans can maintain awareness of their surroundings while appearing to be in a completely relaxed state, Nithros observed. It's clearly advanced training in stealth awareness and threat detection. Rodriguez put her head in her hands. They're relaxation techniques. People do them to reduce stress and feel better. Yes, the three aliens agreed in unison. Advanced psychological conditioning to maintain optimal performance under any conditions. At that moment, Rodriguez's aide announced another visitor. Admiral, Captain Thompson is here with the military exchange report. Captain Sarah Thompson entered the office wearing the crisp uniform of Earth Space Force. She had been assigned to coordinate with alien military observers who were studying human tactical doctrines. Admiral, Thompson reported, the Galactic Military Exchange Program is showing remarkable results. Representatives from 47 different species have completed basic human tactical training, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Rodriguez looked up hopefully. Please tell me that at least our military training is being interpreted correctly. Well, Thompson said, consulting her tablet, there have been some interesting cultural differences. For example, our basic survival training is considered graduate-level coursework by most galactic military academies. Basic survival training? You know, standard stuff. Finding water, building shelter, starting fires, identifying edible plants, basic first aid. The kind of things we teach to new recruits in their first week. Zethkar leaned forward with interest. Captain, what you describe as basic training covers survival skills that most military forces consider advanced specialization courses. Really? Thompson looked genuinely surprised. But these are just fundamental skills that every soldier needs to know. Captain, Veltara explained, most military forces assume that their soldiers will operate in controlled environments with adequate supply lines and support infrastructure. The idea of training every soldier to survive independently in hostile environments is ... unusual. But what if their supply lines get cut? What if they have to operate behind enemy lines? What if they crash land on an uninhabited planet? The three alien delegates exchanged glances that Rodriguez was learning to recognize as their humans are doing it again look. Captain, Nithros said gently, most military forces consider those scenarios so unlikely that they don't train for them. But they could happen, Thompson insisted. Any soldier might find themselves in a survival situation. It's just basic preparedness. And that, Zethkar said quietly, is why human military doctrine is being studied by every major military academy in the galaxy. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that humanity's approach to everything, from entertainment to education to military training, was fundamentally different from how the rest of the galaxy operated. "Captain Thompson," she said. "What? About our peacekeeping operations? Surely those demonstrate our peaceful intentions." Thompson brightened. "Oh yes, our peacekeeping missions have been very successful. We've helped resolve conflicts on 7 different worlds in the past year. And how do other species view these operations?" "Well," Thompson said, consulting her notes, "they're impressed by our efficiency. Most conflicts are resolved within days of human peacekeepers arriving." Rodriguez felt a familiar sense of dread. "How exactly are these conflicts being resolved?" "Standard human peacekeeping protocol," Thompson replied matter-of-factly. "We separate the combatants, establish secure zones, negotiate ceasefire agreements, and help the parties find mutually acceptable solutions." "That sounds reasonable," Rodriguez said hopefully. "The interesting part," Zethkar interjected, "is that most conflicts are resolved simply by the announcement that human peacekeepers are en route. Why is that interesting?" "Because," Veltara explained, "both sides immediately cease hostilities and request urgent diplomatic negotiations rather than risk having humans directly involved in their conflict resolution." Rodriguez stared at them. "They're ending their wars because they're afraid of our peacekeepers?" "Not afraid," Nithros corrected. "Motivated to find solutions before humans arrive and solve the problem for them. But that's good, right? Conflicts are being resolved peacefully." "Yes," Thompson agreed. "Though some of the local commanders have expressed concern about our overwhelming response capabilities." "Overwhelming response capabilities?" "Well, when we deploy peacekeepers, we send enough force to guarantee mission success. Full medical, support, engineering units, communication specialists, security forces, air support, orbital coverage, everything needed to establish and maintain peace in the affected region." Rodriguez was beginning to see the problem. "How big are these peacekeeping deployments?" "Standard doctrine calls for sufficient force to handle any conceivable escalation," Thompson replied. "Usually about division strength, plus naval and air. Support elements." The alien delegates were nodding in understanding. "So when humans offer to help resolve a conflict," Rodriguez said slowly, "both sides see a military force the size of an invasion fleet preparing to keep the peace. It's very effective," Zethkar confirmed. "Most species find it easier to negotiate peace agreements than explain to their populations why they're fighting a war while surrounded by human peacekeepers." Dr. Park was taking notes frantically. "This is fascinating. We're accidentally creating peace through applied intimidation?" "Not intimidation," Veltara corrected. "Demonstration of capability coupled with genuine desire for peaceful resolution. It's quite sophisticated." Rodriguez felt like she was beginning to understand humanity's role in galactic affairs, though it wasn't quite what she had expected when she first entered space. "So let me see if I understand this correctly," she said. "Humans have become galactic peacekeepers not because we're particularly peaceful, but because everyone else is too nervous about our capabilities to fight wars while we're watching." "Essentially." "Correct," Nithros confirmed. "Your species has achieved peace through the application of overwhelming competence rather than overwhelming force. And our cultural exports are popular because other species interpret them as training materials for strategic thinking and tactical planning." "Also correct," Zethkar agreed. "And our entertainment industry has accidentally become the galaxy's primary source of military education and psychological analysis?" "Quite so," Veltara confirmed. Rodriguez sat back in her chair, trying to process the implications of what she was learning. "Dr. Park," she said finally, "in your professional opinion as a xenobiologist, how do you think humanity ended up in this situation?" Park considered the question seriously. "I think we're just being ourselves, Admiral. Humans are curious, adaptable, and determined. We like to explore, learn, and help others. The fact that other species interpret these traits as evidence of strategic genius says more about them than it does about us." "But Dr. Park," Thompson interjected, "don't you think there might be some truth to their interpretation? I mean, humans are pretty good at solving problems and adapting to new situations." Of course we are," Park replied. "But that's just normal human behavior. We evolved on a planet that constantly tried to kill us, so we learned to be resourceful and persistent. That doesn't make us master strategists. It just makes us good at not dying." The three alien delegates exchanged another one of their meaningful looks. "Dr. Park," Veltara said gently, "the ability to not die in consistently hostile environments while maintaining social cohesion and technological advancement is precisely what other species find so remarkable about humanity. Plus," Zethkar added, "your casual attitude toward survival challenges that would destroy most civilizations suggests a level of capability that goes far beyond what you seem to recognize." Rodriguez was beginning to realize that humanity's greatest strength in galactic affairs might also be their greatest weakness. They genuinely didn't understand how unusual they were. "So what happens now?" she asked. "How do we handle being accidentally terrifying to everyone while still trying to be good galactic citizens?" "Admiral," Mithros said, his form becoming more solid as he prepared to deliver what was clearly an important message. "The Galactic Council has developed a proposal for managing human integration into galactic civilization. I'm listening. We propose to establish Earth as the center of galactic peacekeeping and conflict resolution, with human forces serving as neutral arbitrators for interspecies disputes." Rodriguez felt her eyebrows rising. "You want humans to become galactic policemen?" "Not policemen," Zethkar corrected. "Mediators. Your presence alone is sufficient to motivate peaceful solutions in most conflicts. Your actual intervention would rarely be necessary. And in exchange," Veltara continued, "humanity would gain full membership in the Galactic Council, access to advanced technologies from all member species, and favorable trade agreements throughout the galaxy. Plus," Thompson added with obvious excitement, "joint military exercises with every major galactic power. Can you imagine the training opportunities?" Rodriguez could see the appeal of the arrangement, but she was also worried about the implications. What if we make mistakes? What if our intervention makes a conflict worse instead of better? "Admiral," Dr. Park said quietly, "based on what we've learned today, I don't think the galaxy is worried about us making mistakes. I think they're worried about us being too effective." The alien delegates nodded in unanimous agreement. "Humans have demonstrated remarkable restraint in their use of force," Mithros observed. "Your peacekeeping operations have resulted in 0 civilian casualties and minimal property damage across 7 different conflicts. And your cultural influence has reduced interspecies tensions galaxy-wide," Veltara added. "Crime rates have dropped, trade disputes have decreased, and military conflicts have become virtually non-existent, all because everyone's too nervous to misbehave while humans are watching," Rodriguez said with dawning understanding. "All because everyone has learned that humans prefer peaceful solutions and are willing to help achieve them." Zethkar corrected gently. Rodriguez looked around the room at the faces, human and alien, that were watching her expectantly. The decision she made here would shape humanity's role in galactic civilization for generations to come. "Before I give you an answer," she said carefully, I need to ask one more question. Are you offering this arrangement because you think humans would be good at it, or because you're afraid of what might happen if humans aren't kept busy with constructive activities?" The silence that followed was telling. "Admiral," Veltara said finally, "why can't it be both?" Rodriguez felt a laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. Here she was, representing a species that thought of itself as peaceful explorers and diplomats, being offered the role of galactic peacekeepers because everyone else was too nervous about human capabilities to fight wars while humans were paying attention. "Dr. Park," she said, "remind me to include this conversation in your cultural exchange reports. I think the folks back home are going to find it very interesting." "Already on it, Admiral," Park replied, grinning as he continued taking notes. "Captain Thompson, start working on protocols for expanded peacekeeping operations. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." "Yes, ma'am," Thompson replied with obvious enthusiasm. Rodriguez turned back to the alien delegates who were watching her with expressions that she was learning to interpret as hopeful nervousness. "Warlord Zethkar, Queen Mind Veltara, Shadow Lord Nithros," she said formally, "on behalf of humanity, I accept the Galactic Council's proposal. Earth will serve as a center for peacekeeping and conflict resolution, and humans will do our best to help maintain peace throughout the galaxy." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Zethkar's massive form seemed to relax for the first time since she had known him. Veltara's crystalline structure began pulsing with harmonics that sounded remarkably like celebration. Even Nithros became completely solid, his form stabilizing in what she suspected was his species' equivalent of relief. "Admiral," Zethkar said, his voice carrying genuine warmth, "you have just prevented more conflicts than any military force in galactic history. By saying yes to a job offer? By agreeing to let the galaxy know that humans are watching," Veltara explained, "and that humans care about peace and justice." Rodriguez smiled, finally beginning to understand humanity's unique role in the cosmic community. "Well," she said, "I suppose there are worse reputations to have than being known as the species that's too helpful to ignore and too competent to cross." 6 months later, the transformation was complete. The Sol system had become the busiest region of space in the galaxy, with ships from hundreds of different species coming and going in a constant stream of diplomatic, commercial, and cultural exchange. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, the massive diplomatic complex that had been constructed at the edge of human space. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum viewports, she could see the incredible diversity of galactic civilization going about its business. Vorthic acid freighters delivered supplies alongside Scaran bioships. Nethi's shadowcraft flickered in and out of visibility as they practiced maneuvers with human stealth fighters. Trillion warriors sparred with human marines in the station's zero-G combat training facilities, what had started as a terrifying first contact scenario had evolved into something neither side could have predicted. A galaxy-wide peace maintained not through military force, but through the simple knowledge that humans were paying attention and genuinely cared about fair play. "Admiral," her aide announced, "the morning briefing is ready." Rodriguez made her way to the conference room where her staff had assembled for their daily review of galactic affairs. Captain Thompson was there with her peacekeeping reports, Dr. Park with his cultural exchange updates, and a dozen other specialists who helped manage humanity's expanded role in galactic civilization. "Good morning, everyone," Rodriguez said as she took her seat. "What's our status today?" "Quiet day, Admiral," Thompson reported with satisfaction. "No active conflicts anywhere in the galaxy. The closest thing to military action is a territorial dispute between two minor species in the Outer Rim, but they've already requested human mediation." "Any idea what the dispute is about?" Mining rights to an asteroid field, Thompson replied. Both sides claim historical precedents, but neither side wants to risk armed conflict while we're available to help negotiate. Dr. Park looked up from his tablet. Admiral, I've got some interesting updates from the cultural exchange programs. Human university exchange students are reporting that they've become somewhat legendary on their host worlds. Legendary how? Well, apparently our students' approach to academic challenges is being interpreted as evidence of advanced human cognitive enhancement. When human students are given difficult assignments, they don't give up, they form study groups, research extensively, and keep working until they find solutions. Rodriguez had learned to recognize the pattern by now. And this is unusual behavior? Most species apparently accept that some problems are simply too difficult to solve and move on to easier topics, Park explained. The human tendency to persist until we find an answer is being viewed as evidence of superior mental discipline and strategic thinking. What about our professors? How are they being received? Even better, Park said with a grin. Human teaching methods that encourage critical thinking, creative problem solving, and independent research are revolutionizing education across the galaxy. Universities are scrambling to adopt human pedagogical techniques. Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. We're accidentally reforming galactic education now? It gets better, Park continued. Human approaches to scientific research, hypothesis testing, peer review, collaborative experimentation are being adopted as the new gold standard for academic investigation. Because other species don't use the scientific method? They do, but not with the same intensity. Most galactic species conduct research until they achieve satisfactory results. Humans conduct research until they achieve optimal results, then continue researching to see if they can do better. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization might be their simple refusal to accept that good enough was actually good enough. What about our tourism industry? She asked. I heard that Earth has become a popular destination for alien visitors. Thompson looked up from her reports. That's true, Admiral, but there have been some interesting complications. We've had to establish extensive safety protocols for alien tourists visiting Earth. What kind of safety protocols? Well, most galactic species require environmental suits to survive in Earth's atmosphere. The oxygen concentration that humans consider normal is toxic to about 60% of known life forms, and the other 40% find Earth's gravity, weather patterns, and biological diversity to be extremely challenging, Thompson continued. We've had to establish specialized resort facilities with controlled environments, and even then, most alien tourists can only visit for a few days before the stress becomes overwhelming. Dr. Park nodded in agreement. The interesting thing is that despite the physical challenges, Earth tourism is booming. Apparently, visiting a Class 12 death world where humans live comfortably has become a kind of pilgrimage for adventurous species throughout the galaxy. A pilgrimage? They want to see firsthand the environment that produced humanity, Park explained. To understand how such a hostile world could give rise to a species capable of galactic peacekeeping and cultural influence. Rodriguez felt that familiar mixture of pride and bewilderment that had become common since humanity joined galactic civilization. Any problems with our tourist visitors? Just one, Thompson replied. Most alien tourists spend their entire visit marveling at how casually humans interact with Earth's environment. They can't understand how we can walk outside without protective gear, eat unprocessed food, drink water directly from natural sources, and sleep outdoors for recreation. And this is a problem because they go home and tell stories about humans that make us sound like mythological beings. Dr. Park explained. Tales of humans who can breathe poison gas, eat toxic substances, and sleep comfortably in environments that would kill most galactic species. Rodriguez rubbed her temples. So our tourism industry is accidentally contributing to humanity's terrifying reputation? I prefer to think of it as maintaining our mystique, Thompson said with a grin down at that moment. The briefing was interrupted by an urgent communication alert. Rodriguez's aide activated the display, revealing the concerned face of High Arbitrator Velanara. Admiral Rodriguez, Velanara said, her forearms moving in patterns that suggested urgent concern. We have a situation that requires immediate human intervention. Rodriguez felt her peacekeeping instincts kicking in. What's the nature of the crisis, Arbitrator? A first contact scenario in the Gamma sector. A previously unknown species has made contact with one of our exploration fleets, and the situation has become ... complicated. Complicated how? The new species appears to be highly aggressive and technologically advanced. They've surrounded our exploration fleet and are making demands that our translators cannot properly interpret. We fear this could escalate into the first major galactic conflict since humans joined the Council. Rodriguez was already standing, her mind switching into crisis management mode. What kind of demands are they making? That's the problem, Admiral. Our best translation software suggests they're demanding something called tribute or surrender, but we cannot be certain. What we do know is that they've demonstrated weapons technology that could threaten our entire exploration fleet. Rodriguez looked around the room at her staff, who were already preparing for emergency deployment. Arbitrator will depart immediately. Can you provide us with all available data on this new species? Of course, Admiral, but Rodriguez, please be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with here, and we cannot afford to lose humanity's peacekeeping capabilities to an unknown threat. After the communication ended, Rodriguez turned to her staff. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we have our first real test as galactic peacekeepers. Captain Thompson, prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. Dr. Park, compile everything we know about first contact protocols. I want options for every possible scenario. As her staff rushed to prepare for what could be humanity's most important mission since joining galactic civilization, Rodriguez found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. A year ago, humanity had been a species of self-perceived peaceful explorers who thought they were making simple first contact with alien civilizations. Now they were the galaxy's primary peacekeeping force, accidentally terrifying to most species but trusted to resolve conflicts that could threaten interstellar civilization. Admiral, Thompson reported, the fleet is ready for departure. We've loaded full peacekeeping protocols and emergency diplomatic supplies. Dr. Park, what's our analysis of this new species? Based on the limited data, Admiral, they appear to be a previously unknown aggressive civilization with advanced weapons technology. But there's something odd about their behavior patterns. Odd how? They're making demands rather than simply attacking. For a truly aggressive species, that suggests they might be operating according to some kind of code or cultural framework that allows for negotiation. Rodriguez nodded. So there might be room for diplomatic solutions. Possibly. But Admiral, we should be prepared for the possibility that this species might not be impressed by humanity's reputation for peaceful conflict resolution. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Dr. Park, we've learned that humanity's greatest strength in galactic affairs is our ability to adapt to unexpected situations. If diplomatic solutions don't work, we'll find another approach. As the human peacekeeping fleet prepared to depart for what could be the most important first contact mission in galactic history, Rodriguez felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The entire galaxy was counting on humanity to resolve a crisis that could determine the future of interstellar civilization, but she also felt a familiar confidence that had become characteristic of human operations in space. Whatever they encountered out there, humanity would find a way to deal with it. They always did, because that's what humans were good at, not dying, not giving up, and finding solutions to problems that seemed impossible to solve, even when they didn't realize that's what they were doing. Hey there, incredible humans. If that story didn't blow your mind about humanity's true place in the universe, I don't know what will. We just discovered that everything we think is normal about ourselves, our persistence, our adaptability, our refusal to give up, is absolutely terrifying to advanced alien civilizations, who see us as accidentally weaponized apex predators. With hearts of gold. Think about it. Right now, as you're watching this, you're living on a planet that aliens would classify as a Class 12 death world. You're breathing an atmosphere that most species would consider toxic. You're surrounded by millions of species that are all trying to kill each other, and you think of it as nature. You watch movies about fighting impossible odds for entertainment. And aliens think they're training documentaries. The most mind-blowing part? We're so good at being terrifying that we've accidentally created galactic peace just by existing and caring about fairness. The entire galaxy behaves itself because nobody wants to explain to their people why they're fighting a war while humans are watching. I want to know what you think. Drop a comment below telling me which part of humanity's normal behavior you think would be most shocking to aliens. Is it our persistence? Our creativity in turning everything into weapons? Our tendency to adopt apex predators as pets? Or maybe our casual attitude toward living on a planet that's actively trying to kill us? And absolutely smash that like button if you're proud to be part of the galaxy's most accidentally terrifying species. I've got another incredible story lined up that explores what happens when humans encounter the galaxy's most advanced AI and accidentally teach it to have an existential crisis. Trust me, you won't want to miss how humanity's unique brand of chaos affects artificial intelligence. Click the card here or check out the whole playlist for more stories about why the universe should probably be more afraid of us than we are. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is someone who doesn't know they're dangerous. See you in the next one, fellow apex predators.